The fifth chakra, the throat chakra, is the chakra of choice and willpower. It's the fifth in the seven chakras and the fifth in our series of the lessons of the chakra using Dr. Caroline Myss's book, Anatomy of the Spirit. Dr. Myss is a medical intuitive, bringing decades of insight and experience into her book, where she greatly details each chakra, connecting it with physical ailments of the body, spiritual challenges, life lessons, sacred truths, primary fears and strengths. So let's dive into the throat chakra. The symbolic challenge of the willpower chakra is to, quote, progress through the maturation of will. From the tribal perception that everyone and everything around you has authority over you, through the perception that you alone have authority over you, to the final perception that true authority comes from aligning yourself to God's will. Thus, the fifth chakra embodies the challenges of surrendering our own willpower to the willpower of God. Buddha and Jesus, along with other great teachers, represent this state of consciousness, complete union with divine will. The throat chakra is energetically connected to the physical body through the throat, the thyroid, the trachea and esophagus, the parathyroid, the hypothalamus, the neck vertebrae, the mouth, jaw, and teeth. The fifth chakra is energetically connected to the emotional and mental struggles involved in learning the nature of choice, because choice is involved in every detail of our lives, and therefore it is involved in every illness. The primary fears associated with our throat chakra include the fear of having no authority or power of choice within our life. This can start with feeling powerless within our tribe, when we're younger, within our family, and continue on in our personal and professional relationships. There's also the fear of having no authority within ourselves, of being out of control when it comes to our personal responses to substances, to money, to power, to another person's emotional control over our well-being. There is the fear of the will of God. And you can think of that as the fear of the higher forces beyond human control, the universe, if you want. Dr. Myss says, the notion of releasing our power of choice to a divine force remains the greatest struggle for the individual who's seeking to become conscious. Now let's talk about the primary strengths of the throat chakra. They are faith, self-knowledge, personal authority, and the capacity to make decisions knowing that no matter what decision we make, we can keep our word to ourselves and to others. The fifth chakra is aligned to the sacrament of confession. It is symbolic of the fact that we are accountable for the way that we use our willpower. The fifth chakra corresponds to the Tree of Life designations 4 and 5, 4 and 5 on the Sefirot. Hesed, which means love and mercy, and Gevurah, which basically means judgment. Together, they portray the balanced nature of divine will. The implication of these Sefirot is that the divine is merciful and that only God has the right to judge the choices we make. The Sefirot of Hesed reminds us to use loving words to communicate with others, and the Sefirot of Gevurah reminds us to speak with honor and integrity. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Hesed and Gevurah because I really love how the Tree of Life contributes to understanding the power of this energy center. And like Dr. Myss talks about, Hesed and Gevurah represent 4 and 5 on the Tree of Life. Hesed is, quote, the principle that offers space for growth and facilitates a righteous order. So Gevurah also means strength, force, and power, not just judgment. In Gevurah lies the principle of assertiveness, the executive power that overcomes evil with just and righteous severity. So it's two principles that are definitely doing different things, working in harmony. Gevurah is the active force principle that protects the order that's brought about by Hesed, but the Gevurah can also strive beyond it to achieve progression. You can think of these as kind of like a male and female for sure. They're known as the right and left arm of God. Gevurah is related also to the fives, because it is number 5, related to the fives of the minor arcana in the tarot. And this card usually represents an extremely difficult trial. For example, 5 of Pentacles shows people that are homeless and destitute and out in the snow with no shoes and walking past a closed up church. So bleak. It's about those difficult trials. That we have to conjure the strength. We have to conjure like a proper judgment of ourselves, I guess you could say. The virtues of Gevurah are courage, bravery, assertiveness, discipline, and sense of justice. Its vices are cruelty, hatred, vengeance, and blind destructiveness. So that's when that powerful force of Gevurah can go wrong. Another name for Gevurah is Den, meaning justice or law. Gevurah compels us to fight for justice. It is connected to the law of karmic justice, which is the acceptance of responsibility for one's own actions. Hesed and Gevurah, like I said, they're designations 4 and 5 on the Tree of Life, and they represent the balance of mercy and severity. In Anatomy of the Spirit, the 5th chakra's sacred truth is the surrender of personal power to personal will to divine power. The sacred truth is to surrender personal will to divine will. There, I said it right that time. The 5th chakra is the center of choice and consequence, Dr. Myss says, and of spiritual karma. Every choice we make, every thought and feeling we have is an act of power that has biological, environmental, social, personal, and global consequences. We are everywhere our thoughts are, and thus our personal responsibility includes our energy contributions. She goes on to say, understanding the energy consequences of our thoughts and beliefs, as well as our actions, may force us to become honest to a new degree. An inability to be honest obstructs healing as seriously as the inability to forgive. And we talked a lot about that healing power of forgiveness in the last video about the heart chakra. The 5th chakra and its spiritual lessons teach us that personal power lies in our thoughts and our attitudes. And like I said, it's a lot about choices. Choices made from fear may sometimes lead us to what we desire, but they also generally produce unwanted side effects and costly energetic consequences, as Dr. Myss puts it. She says that choosing from a place of fear transgresses our trust in divine guidance. She goes on to say, we all do live, at least periodically, within the illusion that we are in charge of our lives. We seek money and social status in order to have greater power of choice, and so that we do not have to follow the choices that others make for us. The idea of surrendering personal will is obviously in direct conflict with everything that we see around us and that we've come to consider as the measure of an empowered person. And so this logic keeps us in a cycle of fear and surprise, making choices out of fear and then the surprise of the unwanted side effects. She says that we may repeat the cycle of fear, surprise, until we reach a point of prayer in which we say, you choose and I will follow. Once we release this prayer, guidance may enter our lives along with endless acts of synchronicity and coincidence, divine interference at its best. When it comes to faith, the essence of the 5th chakra is faith. Whatever we have faith in commits a part of our energy toward that person or idea. Having faith in a fear commits a part of our energy to that fear. As a result of our energy commitments, meaning our minds, our hearts, and our lives, we become woven into our consequences. I should say that again and clarify. I think I said that wrong. As a result of our energy commitments, we, meaning our hearts, lives, and minds, become woven into their consequences. Sorry about that. Dr. Myss says, our faith and our power of choice are, in fact, the power of creation itself. We are the vessels through which energy becomes matter in this life. Therefore, we all have an inherent spiritual test in our lives to discover what motivates us to make the choices that we do, and to discover what is in charge of our lives. We are all meant to eventually have a crisis that shows us how our personal power is limited, an event that makes us wonder if some other force is acting in our lives. When we gain an awareness of our own limitations, we are open to considering choices we would not otherwise have made. It's those moments when everything seems most out of control that we're finally receptive to some guidance that we would not have been willing to listen to before. Dr. Myss says, surrender to divine authority means liberation from physical illusions. So these illusions can be things like self-limiting beliefs such as, I can't because, fill in the blank. The spiritual energies of the fifth chakra guide us toward this point of surrender, to surrender the illusions that we cling to out of fear. Again and again, we are reminded that being judgmental is a spiritual error. It is not becoming of us to assume we know enough to render a truly fair judgment. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to withhold judgment of another or of oneself, says Dr. Myss. In this chakra, we release the need to know why things happen as they do, and we come to trust that whatever the reason is, it's part of a grander spiritual design. Like we mentioned before, the fifth chakra corresponds to the sacrament of confession. Confession, in energetic terms, Dr. Myss says, it is the acknowledgement that we have become conscious of and therefore empowered over a fear that had previously commanded our spirits. Karma is the energy and physical consequences of the choices we make. Negative choices generate situations that recur in order to teach us how to make positive choices. Acts of confession signify that we recognize our responsibility for what we have created and that we realize the error of our choices. In energy terms, this ritual of confession liberates our spirits from painful learning cycles and redirects us into the creative, positive energies of life. Confession is the breaking of a fear's authority over our lives and replacing it with an empowered self. So how do we manage the lessons of the throat chakra? Think about how the throat is located between the energies of the heart and the mind, and how we have to learn how to balance the way that we respond to their urgings. Usually, our boys get pushed toward their mental energies and our young girls get pushed toward their hearts. Dr. Myss says, mental energy powers the external world, while heart energy powers our personal domains. It is when the head meets the heart that we have a balanced individual who operates with the heart and mind in unison. If the heart and mind are not communicating clearly with each other through the chakra that's in between them, the throat chakra, then one will dominate the other. One will be very mind-oriented or very heart-oriented, to the point where it's an extreme and it's an imbalance. When our minds are in the lead, says Dr. Myss, we suffer emotionally because we turn emotional data into an enemy. We try to control situations and maintain control of our emotions. A lot of people think that it's weak to feel emotions or be guided by them at all. When our hearts are in the lead, we tend to maintain an illusion that all is well. The imbalance of head and heart can turn a person into an addict, says Dr. Myss. In energy terms, any behavior motivated by the fear of internal growth qualifies as an addiction. Even behavior that is usually healthy, like exercise or meditation, can be an addiction if it is used to avoid pain or personal insight. Any discipline can become a willful block between our conscious and unconscious, saying, I want guidance, but don't give me any bad news. We can block ourselves off unknowingly and end up living in a cycle of mentally wanting to change, but emotionally fearing change at every turn. To break out of this pattern, we need to engage the union of the mind and the heart. And this requires one strong choice that is aimed at tomorrow, as Dr. Myss puts it. To break the fear, we have to move straight through it. We have to call its bluff. Change is frightening, but we can't wait for a feeling of safety before we make a move. that only causes us more torment. Dr. Myss's advice for getting through this fear is to remember this. The only way to get that sense of security that you want is to enter the whirlwind of change and come out the other end feeling alive again. So think about what you have gone through when you have had just a crash in your life, a crisis, a terrible event that has made you start to consider things you wouldn't have considered before, that you are just pushed up against a wall or put in a corner where you have changed your values and started looking at the world differently. And how maybe you had to act on a decision that you were terrified to act on, to make the changes. You were afraid of what it would mean losing, but you got through it. And on the other end of it, you were even almost grateful and relieved, not understanding why it happened, not knowing the reason for the events unfolding the way that they did, but seeing how there was something good that came out of it. Maybe a lot of good things came out of it. Maybe you even dodged a bullet from the direction your life was going with your own plans and you didn't see it at the time. So change is really scary only when you're on the one side of it. So you just have to have that faith to use the guidance of balancing mercy and severity, balancing that female tender love with that more masculine assertive sense of justice. That is great, two great principles to think of in balancing, what is the closest I can guess to what divine will would be. So let's get to a couple of things. I think I've got some reflection questions. Yes, I do. So the reflection questions Dr. Myss provides at the end of the throat chakra to kind of give you something to contemplate on. You may want to write them down and journal them and just give them a moment to tiptoe around your head and see what comes out. Number 1, what is your definition of being strong-willed? 2, are there people in your life who have authority over your willpower? 3, are you able to express yourself honestly and openly when you need to? Are you able to express yourself honestly when you need to? Do you try to control other people and what they do or say? If so, why do you need to control them? And 5, what makes you lose control of your own willpower? Are there situations you know you need to change, but you've continually postponed taking action on? Identify those situations and the possible reasons that you have for not wanting to act. All right, guys, thank you for watching.